Hi everyone and welcome back to the channel. Thanks for joining me for yet another Transformers review. It's a bit like buses around here at the moment. You know, you wait for ages for one and then two turn up at once. And I say that because today I collected not only the focus of today's video, this Transform Elements TE-03 Speed Star, but I also picked up Fans Toys Hunk. So look out for that one coming in the very near future as well. But anyway, this guy is the focus of today's review, so let's take a quick look at him first. As usual, I'll give you a quick look at the packaging, and it's fair to say it lives up to TE's previous effort. I like the artwork. It's a nice looking box. It's slightly confusing. I mean, originally this guy was billed as Phantom. That was his name, which of course makes sense because, you know, Mirage. Now that we've got him, he is TE-03 Speed Star, but the box has Unreal Image on it as well. So I don't know, is it Speed Star? Is it Unreal Image? Is it both? Unreal Image makes more sense, what with them being called Mirage, but yeah, these are Chinese manufacturers. English isn't their first language, and these things often get lost in translation. But anyway, let's do a quick 360 of the box. There's nothing really exciting other than the main image to show you. It's all pretty much of a muchness. If we pop it open quickly, I can show you the contents as well. I've previously opened this, so obviously the figure is not in the plastic prison, but you can see it just comes in this regular clamshell, and I'll show you a couple of the accessories just quickly as well that I haven't removed. I'll just take this out so I don't knock things all the way across the room. So the few things left in the box are the spare head and one of the alternate faceplates, but I will go through that in greater detail once we take a look at the figure himself. So yeah, let's do that right now. Okay, so here we are, we're back with a look at the figure, and first glance it's pretty good. It's quite a sweet looking Mirage. I do have a few issues with it, which I'll go into obviously during the course of the video, but I'll give you a quick 360 look at him. All in all, he's pretty clean, you know, and actually surprisingly tune accurate. Not completely faithful, but certainly more so than what we've got before. And obviously I'll run through the accessories now. That's probably a good place to start. So first up we have this separate head. Now this is actually the original head that comes on the figure, and what I've done is I've already replaced it, which was a bit of a nightmare actually. This one here is held together by a screw that you can probably see at the back there. Now I took that apart, that was fine. I was able to sort of separate the two halves of the head, and I thought the ball joint or the head would just slip off of the ball joint easily, but it didn't. So I thought I was going to break it at one point, and this head is incompatible with the other head because it's very subtle, but they are different lengths. You probably can't see it if I put them side by side, but there is a slight difference to the face length and to the length of the helmet. It's quite marginal, but that head there doesn't have a screw hole on the back. It's just a separation piece, and that was well, you'll excuse the bad language, that was a bitch to separate. Got there in the end. I don't know why certain companies insist on making these things harder than they need to be, but I mean the original head sculpt isn't too bad. The face looks very reminiscent of Masterpiece Ironhide actually. Sort of once you've seen that, it's difficult to unsee it. But yeah, it wasn't terrible, and I mean I'd have been reasonably happy with that if that is all we'd had. But the second head comes with two faces, and I've already swapped them out. So it comes with the same face as you get for the regular head, but it's slightly shorter. And again, I'm not sure that will focus. Will you focus? By the look of it, no, it will not. That's annoying. Oh well. It's... Oh, that's better. Yeah, there we go. That's focused now. Yeah, it's not a bad face sculpt. It looks okay. It's the stoic expression, but the only difference really is that it's slightly shorter. The one that I've changed it to is this, his laughing face, because to my mind, Mirage is a bit of a joker. I don't know why that's my thing, because he was always pretty miserable in the G1 tune. But I like that sort of smirking face. You know, he's a hunter, so I kind of, you know, I had this vision of him sort of having that expression on his face as he's about to take out one of his Decepticon targets. But yeah, those are the face options. You know, there aren't too many, but what we get are good. I just wish they were easier to implement. The other accessories are this, his hunting rifle, which is actually a really nicely sculpted piece. It's much closer to the tune than previous versions on other figures. Once I actually compared the animation model, this is a lot closer. So that, yeah, that's not bad, and it's decked out in silver. They haven't gone for like grey here. Like I think if Takara had done this figure, we wouldn't have seen a lot of the silvers that we're getting. We'd have seen more flat colours. But yeah, they've gone with the silver accents here on the various parts of the figure. The other accessory is a bit strange actually. It's the missile launcher here on the shoulder. But unlike previous versions, the G1 original toy and Mmc's Sphinx, it's integrated. The downside of that is that the launcher itself is too short. So it's really stubby there. It should taper off towards the end, and then the silver bit should be on the end. But it's like it stops abruptly, and then the silver piece is there. Almost a sort of, well, not an afterthought, because it's actually quite a clever engineering mechanism. You take that out and then that pushes in. So the rocket is actually the thing that's designed to pop that out. So that goes in, that comes out, and then you click that in and that extends. So it's quite clever, but I just feel that because you have the parts form with the rocket anyway, there's no real benefit. You know, I've taken that out now, I have to do that for transformation. There's no real benefit to having that as an integrated piece. I would have been happier had they elected to go for the standard configuration, whereby you have to you have to remove the piece for transformation entirely. Anyway, it looks good from the front, I'll give it that, and it's you know, I'll go through the articulation in a bit, but it's maybe the implementation isn't quite as good as the idea. Anyway, that's enough about the accessories. Let's take a quick look at the figure himself, and he is a handsome chap, I'll give him that. It's you know, I always put the cartoon, the animation model up at the start of my videos for comparison purposes, and I think you'll agree that he does look pretty faithful to that. You know, I like the overall look. He's very evocative of Mirage. There are obviously some inconsistencies, and it's probably easier to talk about those, for example. So my main bugbear is that he's too light. The blue, maybe not, the blue doesn't show up that well on camera actually, under lights, so it looks different than it does in person, but it is too light. By and large, in the cartoon, Mirage was more of a sort of royal blue, and here he's too light for that. He doesn't look bad by any stretch of the imagination, and he did appear lighter in the cartoon from time to time, but I would have preferred him a shade darker. Maybe not as dark as the Cell version of Sphinx, which was closer to the colour I've wanted, but was just a little bit too dark. So sort of halfway house between those two would have been good. There are some other missed opportunities for toon accurate paint apps. So in the toon, this crotch piece had white on either side and on the back, although it's not actually present on the back on this fella. And another thing that was kind of a grey, you know, was supposed to be metallic in the toon and was represented as grey or white or even silver maybe, were these engine blocks, but they've done them in black, which is was a strange choice. And that's another thing I'll mention, is they've gone for a highly accurate toon aesthetic in robot mode, but elsewhere they've gone for a real world aesthetic, so that the alt mode is a combination of both. So we'll cover that more anyway once we get to alt mode. But yeah, I mean, other than that, the proportions aren't exactly spot on. There's a bit of hollowness in the chest, which I really don't like. I mean, from the front it's fine, but from the side that's quite a big gap, and I'm not a big fan. But I do like the shoulders and the arms, they look good. The hands, I like the articulation on these pieces here, and they're even on sliders, so you can move them down for robot mode, which is good. And he, you know, I like these pieces here. These are far more accurate than anything that's come before. The MMC version had, you know, I think I really liked it when I got it because it looks so much better than DX9's Invisible. But looking at it next to this, honestly, yeah, it shows up all of the limitations of such an old mold. This also has far more accurate feet. I mean, it's not, again, not entirely tune accurate. These things in the tune came all the way down to the floor. And the wheels were much smaller, but you know, you can't do mass shifting, and you can only work within the confines of reality, to be honest. You know, the engineering is such that things can't shift in the way that they would in a fictitious cartoon. But yeah, I think overall, hopefully you'll agree, the aesthetic is there or thereabouts, and it's certainly better than anything that we've had before. Okay, so hopefully that's given you a good enough look at the figure itself. Let's move on to a few articulation checklists, and yeah, we'll be right back with that. Okay, so let's run through the articulation on this guy. He is, well, like TE-01, their OP leader, the Optimus Prime they did. Transform Element has done a pretty good job of updating Mirage for the modern era. He's got pretty much every articulation point you'd want. There are a couple of omissions, but I'll go through those as well. But let's just look at what he does have. So the arm can rotate 360, and that's on friction. It can go all the way out to the horizontal. The shoulder is actually double jointed there, so it can move there and down. You have a bicep swivel, although it's technically a little bit higher. It's more like a shoulder swivel. It's quite tight on mine, but it's there. You have these individually articulated side pieces here, which can go up and down on the hinge I previously mentioned and move up and down and around. You have a nice double jointed elbow there, and the hand is on a swivel there. Oh, sorry, the wrist, I should say. The fingers, they are the usual kind of MIDI bot, 3 pinned here and 1 index finger and thumb. The thumb, I believe, is articulated on this screw here, so it can move, but yeah, it doesn't move out or anything. It just moves up and down, which is not much use for anything really. The head, which I didn't mention before, this is one of the things that kind of annoy me about the figure. It comes so close to being amazing, but it's not. The head's on a ball joint, as I said. It's quite stiff. This piece here on his chest does not tab in any way that I've found, and neither does the chest. Now the chest here, that stays in place, but this piece does not. So when you move the head, which is on this raised piece here, it moves. So you have to hold on to it and then reposition it afterwards, which is annoying. As you can see, the head moves up on this strut here, so you can get a good range of motion on it. So if you wanted him to look down, you lift the head up like that, then pose him looking down, so from that angle he looks okay. So you can cheat it. It's a bit of a cheat because obviously he ordinarily wouldn't be able to look down that far, so you have to lift the head or the neck up first. But it's good because that affords poses that some figures that have faces that look like this can't do, because their chins hit the top. So I like the fact they've given that, even though it does look comical when you do it that way. It also obviously allows him to look back quite a long way, and he can sort of look side to side, you know, quizzical dog look, but it's a very stiff ball joint, so not really. And obviously it turns. So it's okay, but it really bugs me that you have to hold on to it in such a silly way to stop it from moving every time you manipulate it. And I really wish that had clipped in for a more secure fit. It's not the end of the world, and I'm probably, you know, you probably think I'm nitpicking, but other figures don't have that issue, so it is a bit annoying. Anyway, moving on down the figure, we come to the waist. Now, there was some consternation when the figure was originally previewed. It didn't look like it had a waist swivel because of the way the back is. Now, that it was understandable because these pieces here, obviously they hit when you turn him. But even so, he does have a minimal waist swivel like that. Doesn't get you very far, granted. But what he does have, and again, it's quite tough to do, but he does have, I want to do this without breaking it, he does have an ab crunch. So you'll see under there, there's a little blue post, a notch in there that clicks in, and it does allow him to come forward that far, which, you know, it's not the biggest ab crunch I've ever seen, but it's not bad. So when you combine that with the ability to look down, and in fact, if you lift that chest piece out a little bit, you can get even more of an ab crunch out of him. So only just occurred to me to do that, actually. So yeah, you could, I mean, it looks frankly rubbish from the side because, you know, it's all kinds of gap, all kinds of gappy, sorry. But if you were doing some sort of photography and you wanted him to be in a leaping pose, and your camera angle, say you had him on a flight stand or something, or suspended some way, you could get a really nice deep pose out of him like that, and you could lift him up on that peg like that. Lift the head up on the armature, and that way he could be looking down with a really cool sort of crunched downward looking pose. So it's actually pretty nice. You can get some, and obviously when it's like that, you can get a lot more articulation out of the waist swivel, which is really good. So yeah, I mean, what at first looks to be a pretty limited range of motion actually proves to be quite good. So I'll just clip that back together and sort the head out. There we go. Right, excuse me for being a bit ham-fisted. Should change my name to Bobby Skullface. Anyway, throwing shade, it'd be Bobby Skullface there. That's not good, is it? Anyway, moving down, we have these hip skirts. Now, these are one of the aforementioned sort of, not omissions. Omissions is the wrong word because they're obviously there, but it uses the old style Masterpiece engineering where they're on a pin and they flip out like that or up, and then the leg can move up and get a pretty decent, you know, it's above the horizontal, so that's not bad. You can also get out above the horizontal out to the side as well, which is really good. You also have a rear hip skirt which goes back that far, but obviously, you know, with the assembly here, you're not going to get too far. Now, one thing actually I think I may have missed, and if I have, I'll put a sort of note along the screen, is when I first opened the figure, this back was mistransformed, and this engine block actually came out over there. So I pulled the engine block out and changed it. Now, one thing I didn't think to do, in fact, we might even be able to do that on camera, because it's just occurred to me that the bottom of those pieces there could be mistransformed. I think, yes, look, here we go. So I think these do indeed fold in. So they should be in robot mode, and that would actually allow for a greater range of movement backwards. So yeah, and it actually looks a bit cleaner as well, so that's good. So I forgot to do that. Or another thing I forgot to mention, or neglected to mention, was that this guide doesn't come with any instructions, none at all. So you're kind of flying blind, which is a bit cheap. TE-01 did, and I don't understand why this doesn't. Hopefully the second run will correct that oversight. But yeah, anyway, so that was a little niggle I had, which I've just proved actually isn't a niggle at all. It's something that the instructions don't, well, the lack of instructions don't tell you about. So, but it looks okay. It looks like that's you know, seems logical to me that it would be intended to be that way. Anyway, so you have that much kick back, that much kick out, and kick forward. The thighs have a decent swivel on them, and you also have pretty decent double jointed knees, so you can get a long way back, like way further up than most figures do. Yeah, I mean, that looks really good. You also get some pretty decent ankle rockage, and you don't get much toe pivot up, but there is a good range of motion down. So I'd imagine you could probably get some pretty extreme poses out of him should you so desire. See, again, these hip skirts are annoying. You have to manually move them. They don't even move up because they catch, so you have to manually move them. And these things are really tight as well, I have to say. It gives me a little bit of cause for concern there. But yeah, you can see he has a really deep, so you could get some, you know, with the crunch, you could get some really cool dynamic poses out of him. You know, I'm just messing around here while I'm doing the review, but I think he looks pretty good. So yeah, and obviously on the back there you have the heel spurs, which are the rear spoiler, but they act as heel spurs, and yeah, they do a job. I mean, you know, they are what they are. So yeah, all in all, I think he's got a pretty good, well, above average, definitely above average articulation. The thing that he doesn't have that I would have loved him to have had is a butterfly joint. That's the only thing that I can really say he's missing for me. It's not the end of the world, but it would have been, you know, the icing on the cake for a figure that has, you know, really nice articulation. Apart from that, so yeah, I think honestly he's pretty good in terms of articulation. I can't fault him, you know, apart from that minor comment. So as long as you can accept the fact that he doesn't have the butterfly joint, and you know, to be honest, like with the double joint, you can kind of, I mean, all right, you can't bring it across the front, but you can pull off some reasonable poses anyway. Yeah, it does the business, and at this price point and this size, it can almost be forgiven for not implementing everything, especially with the way the transformation works, or how I've seen it works, because of course there are no instructions. But anyway, let me just bring in Mmc Sphinx a moment so we can just do a quick comparison. If you just give me a second, I'll be right back. Okay, and here we are. We have him next to Mmc Sphinx, a figure that I quite liked. I mean, I didn't think it was the greatest looking figure of all time, but I think it's because I was comparing it to DX9's Invisible, which I really don't like as a toon accurate guy. I'm sure it's a fine figure, but it's just not to my aesthetic preference. Sphinx filled a hole in my collection, but looking at it now, yeah, I mean, there's really not much that this guy does that this guy doesn't do much better. As I said, I think looking at it this way, the only thing that I could possibly say that I prefer are some of the deco choices and the rocket launcher. So that's how Sphinx's launcher looks, and you can see the difference there. It's almost like the TE version just stops, you know, for no apparent reason. Well, it is. That's what happens. Let's face it. But yeah, from the front you don't really see it. So, and the other thing about this this guy is that this launcher, once it's clipped on, it goes down, but it doesn't really go back because it hits things. So it has very limited manipulation potential. Whereas this, you know, it can go up and down. It's on another hinge there, so it can move. You can have it down. It can go around because it's on that armature. It's a much better play piece. The other thing as well, like I never noticed it before comparing. The weapon is not toon accurate. it's perfectly nice. And in fact, I actually think I prefer the colour, like the flatter, more matte silver, but it doesn't look as good in terms of tune accuracy. He has the white accents on his crotch, and if you can see there, you can probably see it better that side. So that's tune accurate, whereas this guy doesn't. But again, the actual crotch piece itself isn't as accurate, and he doesn't have it on the back either. He's got quite a nice clean upper back, but I mean, you just look at the lower section. I mean, that's really where he falls down. Those, you know, you can kind of forgive things like the face and head sculpt not being perfect. I mean, they're okay, it's passable, but it's not great. But the arms are fine, although he does have these stupid designed forearms where they have a tendency to pop out and things like that. When you move the wrists, you know, he has these doors can manipulate, but they don't move out. The hip skirts are flappy as all hell on mine. I don't know if that's a common issue. He does fill out the sides better, but yeah, I don't think that's really any great shakes. You know, when you take into account everything this guy offers. From the waist down, I mean, there's no contest. Silhouette-wise, this thing wipes the floor with Sphinx. And that's not to say I dislike Sphinx, but, you know, these newer moulds that are really tune-centric and have modern engineering, they're starting to show up some of the older stuff now. And yeah, when I first saw the proto shots of this, you could just tell instantly. As I said, this is probably a shade too dark. On the camera, it looks more purple than blue as well, but it does look blue in person. But it's probably too dark. It needs to be more of a royal blue. So something halfway between the two would have been the perfect colour for me. But I can overlook the lighter colour on this for all of the, you know, there's a litany of improvements here, aren't there? Like it's just, you know, it's no contest. Let's be honest. You know, this guy's pretty clean. I do like that. Like the actual quality is quite clean. There are no sprue marks, like there are quite a few sprue marks on this figure, as there were with TE-01 on the first run. But yeah, it's not bad. So yeah, I think overall there's absolutely no contest in terms of which one I prefer aesthetically. TE-03 all the way. So anyway, that's enough rambling about the robot mode and comparison with Sphinx. What I'm going to do now is something I don't normally do, and that's attempt to transform him on camera, because I've seen a couple of videos, Chinese reviews, and it looks like it could be quite fun and intuitive, but I haven't got instructions, like I've said, and I won't be able to watch them live, so it could all go horrendously wrong. So if there's a section of this review that you're expecting that I'm referencing now that isn't in the final review, that will be because I completely messed up and I decided to go against it. But yeah, I'm going to give it a go. So if you give me a second, I will get myself ready and I'll be back with the transformation process for Speedstar. We're back with a look at TE-03's alt mode. And I mean, as much as a pain in the arse as it was to get here, I'm actually really impressed. It looks really nice. I do have some issues with it, which, yeah, it wouldn't be me if I didn't have issues, eh? But it, on the whole, the silhouette is more cartoon accurate than anything I've seen before in a Mirage toy. And that's what's infuriating about it. But anyway, the stuff I really like, I mean, the front of the car, the nose here looks much more cartoon accurate than usual. The shape of the car is really great. The spoiler, the wheels look really good. You've got, you know, a nice finish to it. These details here were in the tune sometimes in the model, you know. And now that I've actually got it all pegged together properly, it does actually clean up quite nicely. There aren't too many gaps. I mean, there are quite a lot of panel lines, but you know, what are you going to do? I did find the transformation more fiddly than the Optimus Prime they put out, which is odd because a lot of people had a problem with that. But I think that had instructions and it's a bigger figure, so you could you know, it didn't feel like it was going to break. It was definitely a more solid construction than this. This had a lot of fiddly pieces, especially that shoulder cannon, which I did actually think I was going to snap at one point off the armature. Anyway, now it's here, I quite like it. I think it looks really nice. It rolls, you know, as cars ought. And yeah, I honestly think it's a nice looking piece. The bugbears for me are really in the design choices that TE went for. And I think I alluded to this earlier in the review. I cannot for the life of me understand how they have gone for a hyper realistic bot mode, hyper tune accurate bot mode, and then an alt mode that is, you know, similarly pitched, but then veers into realistic mode or realism. The reason I mention that is because obviously, as long-time Transformers fans will know, you were unable to use any real-world kind of sponsorship or anything like that on the side of cars. So any Autobot car that had real-world sponsors had the wording changed. Now, as such, in the Toon, Mirage's livery couldn't have the real-world sponsor on, so it had Citan 26. But as you can see here, they have gone in a first for anywhere in the world, Toon, comic, any previous toy iteration I've ever seen. TE have opted for the realistic Gitan, which was on the Ligier JS11 car that Mirage is based on. I know this is really nitpicky, but it bugs the hell out of me, and I don't understand why they did it. And it was pointed out to them before the release as well, so it's doubly frustrating. But this, Mirage has never had Gitan on the side of his car, ever. Not in any iteration, as I've said. So for them to do it here is really puzzling to me. I know some people actually prefer this because they're like, at last we have the official, because obviously this is an unlicensed product and they can do what the hell they want because it's China. But I want tune accuracy. I don't want a mishmash of both. And that's what's so annoying about it. This comes so close to being a really perfectly tune accurate Mirage, and then they go and do that. And I don't like it. I mean, at the very least, they have got the 26 on the right side. The initial releases of Sphinx had 26 Citan, whereas they corrected it on their cell version to Citan 26. But yeah, still it bugs me. Also, another thing that bugs me is the engine block back here, which is black. In the Toon, again, this was silver, grey, white, call it what you will. Again, I don't know why they did this. They could quite easily have made this the right colour. It would have blended in with the back of the car, with the deco there. They've gone for this. I know it's more realistic, but they've put Ford on it. It's this mismatch I don't like. Like, go for one aesthetic. If you want a real world alt mode, go with that. If you want a Toon alt mode, go with that. Don't half-ass and do both. That said, it is still definitely more Toon accurate than what we've had before. And I'm going to bring in Mmc Sphinx here, which I have transformed, and a lot quicker and easier, I might say, than TE-03. And it's only now that I have them side by side that I can see just how inaccurate this is. It's not a bad looking car, I quite like it, but it by no means represents the Toon version of Mirage any better than this does. I mean, the proportions are all off. The nose doesn't look the same as the Toon. I haven't actually pulled those out yet. Let's do that just for completeness. But yeah, even that doesn't look as good. I mean, I like the the gimmick it's got with the turning wheels there is quite amusing. because it's so poorly implemented, really. You know, those collapse too much to the point when he has trouble rolling, as you can see. Like, you know, he kind of stops, whereas this guy will just go, which is great. Things I do like about this, I like that the engine block is the lighter colour, as it should be. I like that it says Citan, not Gitan. I mean, other than that, I mean, this, you know, there are things good about both. I mean, you'll probably see the animation model that I put up at the beginning, so you can make your own comparison. I'm sure you can Google it anyway, but there are bits of this which are more tune accurate, and then there are bits of this which are more tune accurate. So neither one has got it spot on. This is closer, but it had an opportunity to be perfect, and that really, really gets on my nerves, that they just had that opportunity and ballsed it up for whatever reason. Yeah, I mean, like this, you can see the spoiler moves up and down, and, you know, you can manipulate it. You can do that with this as well, although it won't go back, but it can go down and then go forward to go flat if you so desire. If I can figure out how to put a picture in, I might put one of the official Ligier JS11 in here, so you can compare him to this. And it does look very similar. I mean, obviously this has got tune proportions. Another oddity, you know, why do the proportions of a tune car if you're going to do the real life deco? But yeah, I just think overall this is definitely much closer, and, you know, this is a nice looking sports car, nice looking car, but it doesn't look like the vehicle upon which it's based or the tune as much as this does. I managed to pull the tyre off there, that's interesting. It also has a few other issues, like I've said. You know, this mould was a bit flaky in some areas, but yeah, they went with the right livery, which makes this so annoying. Anyway, I realise this is a super nitpicky point, and, you know, it's probably only me and others with the same mental illness as me who are bothered, but it does bug me. That said, I can live with it. I'm not going to have it in alt mode, really. I'm going to transform, well, I have transformed this. I'm now going to keep this in alt mode, put his little holographic pilot in there, or driver in there, and he'll go on my alt mode shelf of figures I've replaced, along with the likes of Fans Toys Willis, the original MP21B. I'm struggling to think what else I've done now. There are a couple of others anyway that I've recently replaced. Bagcube's Brawny will shortly be superseded by Fans Toys Hunk, for example. So yeah, he will find his place, and he will look fine doing that. But this is definitely the better. But I'm going to have him in robot mode because he's so much better as a tune accurate Mirage. So yeah, I hope, you know, I hope some of you out there agree with me, and it's not just me with this sickness. But it's so close to being perfect that it just takes the edge off slightly. But I will concede that by and large it is much better than what we've had before. Anyway, I don't really have much more to say about the alt mode. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a car, it rolls, it looks like this. It's not as exciting as a giant robot to me. So I'm going to get him transformed back into his robot mode now. Hope to Christ I don't break him. And then I'll be back with some final thoughts. So please bear with me. Let's do some final thoughts. You know, like I've said, I just want to echo what I said in the rest of the video. It's a really great looking toon Mirage. You know, he fits the G1 aesthetic really well. Just to give you a rough idea, you know, here he is with the only figure I have to hand, which is the first version of TE-01's Prime. And let me just adjust the camera for the height discrepancy. There you go. Now, as you can see, he really looks the part. I think there's a no-brainer decision to replace Sphinx on my shelf with this guy. The blue is a bit of a bugbear, but ultimately I think that's because I've been used to the very dark Sphinx. It is darker than the original Sphinx, which is good, so it's a medium between the toon and the other options. but everything else is so much better, it's hard to overlook. He's got real shelf presence. He's really nicely articulated, you know, apart from butterfly joint, he's pretty much perfect. And yeah, aesthetically, he blows the competition away. The elephant in the room, which some of you may be aware of, are QC issues. I didn't mention this at the beginning because it's not really a fault of the figure, it's a factory assembly issue. So some of you may know that the legs were misassembled, or the leg assembly, the loops that attach the legs to the waist were inverted, which meant that his legs were, there was too much of a gap between the hip skirt and the top of the leg, and that meant that the alt mode didn't fit together properly. Some of them had one misassembled, some had two, mine had both incorrect. So if I was never going to transform it, it would have been fine. He just would have had more ball joint visible than you would like. The downside obviously would be that you wouldn't be able to transform into alt mode properly. The fix, which I've documented in another video on my channel, is relatively easy as long as you take your time. And it only affected the first batch. I believe there was, I was lucky stroke unlucky enough to get one of the first batch, so I had the issue. I believe there's now a delay on the figure while TE recall it to repair them, and then they're going to ship out a new batch, so you might be waiting a little while now for a corrected figure. But I think that anything that you order from now on is going to have the fix applied, so you shouldn't have to worry about it going forward unless someone has old stock, I guess. But even if you do get one of the ones with the issue, as long as you're careful, and I'll reiterate that, you shouldn't have too many problems fixing this yourself. You know, it is an annoyance, as are other little things, like, you know, I've got a little bit of silver fleck from, you know, obviously it's got on the blue paint, which is a minor annoyance, excuse me, put my teeth in properly. And there are sprue marks and things, but, you know, there were on this guy, and ultimately, you know, a lot of figures have those defects. You know, I can't remember the last time I got a Takara masterpiece that didn't have paint issues or sprue issues or something like that. You know, their flagship MP44, for example, had, you know, not only paint issues but sprue marks and breakages. So, you know, that was 350 quid. So you can't really argue about a figure that costs less than £60 delivered. For me, this is a no-brainer. If you are a toon-centric guy like me, you have to get this guy to replace whatever Mirage you've got. If you don't have a Mirage, this is the perfect option. I know that Fans Toys has teased one, but as with most Fans Toys teases, you know, considering what they've got on their upcoming release roster that we haven't even seen yet, we could be years away. We probably are years away from this, and their Jazz, and their Cliff Jumper, and their Huffer, you know. I've no doubt that when they come out, they will look very pretty, but the engineering and transformation might not be as good as this guy. They'll probably have a lot of paint, so certain reviewers will, you know, wank over them, for want of a better word, until the cows come home. But yeah, this guy is really nice. He's here now, he's cheap, and he does the job. So if you're after a masterpiece scale Mirage, he is definitely worthy of your attention. And as you can see, he looks fantastic next to his leader there. Okay, so that about wraps it up. I know I have a tendency to labour points, so I'll try not to do that today anymore. I'm always really grateful for people tuning in and watching these videos. I do them as a hobby, as I've often said. It's nice to share the hobby with other people, hear your thoughts, hopefully provide you with a look at some figures that you haven't had a chance to get yet or might be interested in getting ahead of time. And yeah, I do appreciate all the comments on the reviews, and I like to engage with people, so feel free to drop me a message and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Anyway, it only remains for me to say thanks for tuning in yet again, and I hope to see you in the near future for my Fans Toys Hunk review. Until then, take care.